Sometimes I feel as though I'm just like jumping in the water, and I had to jump today, or it was going to get dark. You know how I am about the procrastination stuff. Anyway, but I'm here, and I'm thankful to be here. And lovely Southern California. I'm looking to my right, and that's east, and the moon is rising, and it's almost a full moon. It's going to be a full moon in the next couple of days. And um, the sun is over here and it's going down, and it's a very clear sky for the most part. It's been windy today, very, very windy, and I'm thankful for that. I don't think it's done any damage. It was not as windy as it was the other day, but um, I did get some chimes for Valentine's Day as a present, and maybe you'll get to hear them. We'll see. But anyway, um, I want to read a couple of things today. One is going to be a poem, and the other, there they are, my chimes. Pretty cool, huh? The other thing I'm going to read is um, something, excuse me, by John Rappaport. And so I'm finding that so many people are very, very comfortable with the lies and not willing or even desirous of, not willing to or desirous or desiring to, in any shape, form, or fashion, uh, figure out the truth of things. And um, that's very bothersome because I heard someone the other day, and it was on one of these like MASKLESS. There's a business thing here in California, or one of those groups like that, where people don't seem to be buying into everything. And then somebody was saying, "Well, I had COVID, or our family had it." And I thought about it, and I thought, maybe so. I mean, I don't know about whether or not this virus actually exists. And I'm skeptical of anybody who actually says that um, he or she knows either way. I'd like to know more about the arguments either way. I've sort of bypassed the cat dog cat corporation and the whiskey hotel owl corporation. Um, I know what they're saying, but I'm talking about actual independent science. So I'm not seeing a lot of that. I'm looking for it, and I would like very much to find the truth about things. And I was curious when that person said, "Oh, we had this." If it had been a year ago exactly to this date, what would that person have said? What would she have said? "Oh, we were sick. You know, we had this. We had a cold. We had the flu, whatever." And it wouldn't have been a big deal. But suddenly, the flu is nowhere to be found, and they're actually saying, well, that's because we're doing all this stuff of wearing masks and staying 6 feet away from people and all that. And I don't quite believe that. But that mainstream, I've read in a mainstream article today that said that very thing. And I'm having a hard time believing that, especially because I understand, because I've read a whole lot about the science of the PCR process slash test is how I always write, or often write it, because it is more of a process of discovering, genetic material rather than a process for diagnosing illness. From what I have read, from what the inventor said that I heard on video. And so, anyway, I'm going to put this link in for John Rappaport's blog, but I wanted to read a little bit of it, and I might read the whole thing. It's fairly short. Defeating COVID test fraud, memo to lawyers and clients. As I've detailed in my current series of articles on the COVID PCR test fraud, the test is run in cycles. Each cycle is a quantum leap of magnification of the swab sample taken from the patient. When the test is run at 35 cycles or higher, the result is meaningless. Millions of those results are false positives. The patient is falsely told he is infected. However, most labs fraudulently run the test at 40 cycles or even higher, and the labs do not disclose to patients or doctors how many cycles they are deploying. So, here is a legal strategy lawyers should consider. If a client is told to get tested, his lawyer states the following: my client needs a sworn affidavit from the lab declaring how many cycles will be used. If the lab refuses to comply, sue them. If the lab complies and the cycles are higher than 35, sue them. We also know that test results from various labs are not uniform. One lab will say the patient tests positive, another lab will say negative. This fact has been an open secret in the testing community for decades. And I will just say that there was a lot of controversy about the HIV uh, test, and I think that that's what he might be referring to here. I'm going to also say that I'm going to put this link in the comments, and it does have references to it, so you can look it up and do your own research, and that's what I'm hoping you will do to find out the truth and see, point out things that seem shady and be skeptical of everything you read and hear. So I'm going to get back to this. Strategy. A lawyer has his client tested at several centers in one day in different locations in different states, knowing that a different lab will process each test. If the tests come back with different results, sue the labs. What would happen if, say, 50 lawyers and their clients pursued these two strategies and sued? What would happen if a significant amount of publicity surrounded each lawyer and his client? A breakthrough would occur. A huge number of people across the world would become aware that COVID PCR testing is rife with fraud. Even if judges and courts refuse to hear the cases, the publicity alone would provoke a major transformation in public insight. There is a recent precedent for demanding to know the number of cycles the PCR labs are deploying. It comes from the governor of Florida's office and his public health department. On December 3rd, 2020, both offices issued a regulation requiring state labs to report the number of cycles for every test they run. Cycle threshold, known as CT values, which is the number of cycles, and their reference ranges as applicable, must be reported by laboratories to the Florida Department of Health via electronic laboratory reporting or by fax immediately. If your lab is not currently reporting CT values and their reference ranges, the lab should begin reporting this information to FDOH within 7 days of the date of this memorandum. We can assume, and that's the end of the quote, we can assume there is only one reason for this order. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and the State Department of Health are aware that tests run at 35 cycles or higher are useless and misleading, and they want to stop this crime. Public interest law firms, loan attorneys, do something vital now. Expose and defeat the COVID PCR test. By defeating it, you reveal that millions of so-called COVID cases are a massive fraud and a lie, and you also defeat the lockdowns, which are based on the number of cases. Wow, that's a really important point, and a really good legal strategy. And I hope some lawyers start doing that and read this. And it's it's a really good strategy to see. I mean, maybe all these labs would have the same results, but if not, you know, I mean, why is no investigative journalist doing this? And John Rappaport is an investigative journalist, and he's suggesting, doing this. And it's a really brilliant strategy. And as I say, he has some references for the PCR process test, um, and the absolute unscientific nature of saying, well, we found this with using the PCR process, and that means you're ill. I think it's one of the central, from what I've been reading, not just with him, but the studies I read last April and putting it all together and connecting the dots. I think it's a really important part of the psychological operation is that people believe these tests. It's really the only way they can diagnose anything, you know. Um, So, showing the con in those is very helpful to discovering the truth. And maybe there is no con, okay? I'm open, certainly open to that, but shouldn't we be investigating that kind of thing and seeing what's really going on behind this? I hope that truth is very important to you. I think a lot of people, they're just living in the lies and they're okay with it because it's much more comfortable to do that, and it's much more uncomfortable to live in the truth. And of course, if you don't obstruct your breathing, you're living in the truth because you know that we're supposed to breathe as humans, and that's how we're healthiest. And we're supposed to be around humans, and that's how we're healthiest. So, and nothing's changed that in the past year, not any kind of super virus that when everything I read about it said that it, and I haven't read anything recently, but when it first came out, they talked about the factor, the spreadability factor, and that has a name. I want to say it's R factor or something like that, but it was a 2 or 2 or 2.5, and it was much less than like measles and mumps and some other illnesses. It was supposedly a whole lot less, and yet the thing was supposedly, just so dangerous that you cannot sing in church. That's why when you really look at these things and get out of mainstream media, which seems to be putting people in a trance, but when you really look at these things, there's so many things to question. And I really hope if you're watching this that you will be questioning these things and questioning a lot of stuff you hear, even from other people. Because I hear people, say the wrong thing or think, oh, it's an airborne illness. Is it? How do we have proof of that? Why were all the playgrounds shut down? You know, I mean, things don't make logical sense, but people are believing anyway. And that's why I think, and I hope with you, the truth will be extremely important. It certainly is with me. And that's why I'm delving into all this stuff. I'm going to read a personification poem by Charles Bukowski. He talks about this woman, and at the end, we learn who this woman is. Um, it's there's a book, I think in the 16th or 17th century called 17th, I think, called "In Praise of Folly," and it talked about folly as if folly, the kind of like joking and goofing off kind of thing, or the definition of folly, Folly, was like a woman, I think, in that book. And all throughout, we see Folly doing this and that. And so that's kind of like this poem, um, which is neat because that, is a long tradition that's been going on for centuries. And Charles Bukowski used it in the 20th century. I assume this poem was written probably in the 1980s or 90s, um, maybe a little earlier. It's called "She Comes from Somewhere," probably from the belly button or from the shoe under the bed, or maybe from the mouth of the shark, or from the car crash on the avenue that leaves blood and memories scattered on the grass. She comes from love gone wrong under an asphalt moon. She comes from screams stuffed with cotton. She comes from hands without arms, and arms without bodies, and bodies without hearts. She comes out of cannons and shotguns and old Victrolas. She comes from parasites with blue eyes and soft voices. She comes out from under the organ like a roach. She keeps coming. She's inside of sardine cans and letters. She's under your fingernails, pressing blue and flat. She's the signpost on the barricade, smeared in brown. She's the toy soldiers inside your head, poking their lead bayonets. She's the first kiss and the last kiss and the dog's guts spilling like a river. She comes from somewhere and she never stops coming. Me and that old woman, sorrow. And a lot of us have seen something in the past year from of that old woman, sorrow, who seems to be everywhere these days, and maybe has always been everywhere. That's a very human and insightful poem um, by Charles Bukowski called She Comes from Somewhere. And actually, this book was written in, oh, let's see, um, I should have done a little research. 1999. Okay. This is a copyright of 1999, so I was probably right. That poem was probably written in the 80s or the 90s. 1999. Wow, it really seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? Well, the moon's a little bit higher and it looks really almost full. So I hope it's clear where you are and that you can take a look at the moon. It's a beautiful evening here in Los Angeles, and I hope it's beautiful wherever you are, and hope you'll keep up a search for the truth. And if you haven't been doing any searching for the truth, um, now's a good time to start. Okay, I hope you have a wonderful evening.